and welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today I'm with Noelle Toscano, and we're going to get a little story here in just a minute. We have a lot in common. We've been going back and forth talking about some of our experiences being part of, was it Baptist church or evangelical where you were at?
Baptist, yes.
Yeah, same here. And so, there's some, not all Baptist churches are bad out there. Maybe there's some good ones out there, but at least my experience was pretty interesting. We'll say that. We'll say it was interesting, very political, very heated, and yeah. But let's talk about let's get your story real quick, and tell us about how you got involved. What were you born in it? How you got out of it? And yeah, this floor is yours.
All right. It's interesting because I found you because you were on another YouTube channel of a friend of mine. And as soon as I heard you start talking, I was like, he is from Buffalo, 100%.
That's funny.
And then you started talking about just your journey. And I was like, oh, this is really similar to mine. I mean, we went to the same high school. We never met each other. And right. I thought, do we have any mutual friends?
It's crazy. It really is. We have a lot.
And we do. Yeah. We do. Maybe we'll talk about that. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I went to Ken West Senior High School. I graduated in 1998. And my dad is the pastor of Riverside Baptist Church. So I wasn't necessarily born into it. Both of my parents were first generation Christians. So they had grown up in addicted families. And my mom got pregnant when she was 20 years old. She was not ready for this. It was kind of a one night stand type situation, a very short relationship. And then she's pregnant with twins. So it really turned her life upside down. And wow. She didn't have a support system. She was in South Florida. And her friend said, church people will help you. So she ended up going to church, and they did. They just really kind of rallied alongside her and let her live with them and took care of us when we were babies so that, she could work. And then they ended up moving up to Canada, and she ended up moving to Buffalo because it's so close to Canada. So she could work in the city. So she went from South Florida to like the coldest place on the planet. Wow. She did not love it, but she ended up walking distance to a church. And that's where she met this guy. And he was a brand new baby Christian believer. He's in a rock band, and he was like Mr. Cool guy. And they liked each other, fell in love, got married. And he ended up adopting us. And then they had 2 more boys together. So
interesting.
My parents being first generation Christians coming out of, I was born in 1979. They were raised in like the 60s and 70s. And I think that they had such traumatic upbringings that they thought Christianity will be the answer to how we can raise our children. We can make sure that they're not getting into trouble. The AIDS is around, teen pregnancy is around, drugs are around, like all these super scary things that were killing all their friends and family members. They thought Christianity, it's not going to happen to us because we're going to really, really shelter our kids. But they were extremely abusive, both of them, in the name of God wants me to treat you this way, discipline you this way so that, you don't fall away.
Right.
And it was a ton of fear-based, a lot of fear of demons, a lot of fear of strangers, fear of hell, fear of God. I remember falling asleep at night and not being able to sleep because there was like a horrible thunderstorm. And all I could think about was in the movie Legend, Tim Curry as like the demon guy. And I would tell my parents, I was petrified that he's going to come for me, in my sleep and take me to hell. And my dad would be like, well, just pray, just pray and you'll feel better. And I was like, and I prayed and I didn't feel better.
Right.
It's just a lot of just indoctrinated from very, very young age, a lot of scripture versus memory, church, anytime the door was open, and VBS. And then my dad got a job as part-time youth pastor of that church. And then he got a full-time youth pastorate position in upstate New York, Barker, New York. We lived there for a while and then moved back to that church, Riverside Baptist Church in Buffalo, where he was originally a youth pastor. And then he became the senior pastor there. And so I lived in Kenmore, right by the high school, Ken West on Meadow Lane for my 4 years of high school. And I was like the Bible girl. I was like leading the Bible studies. I was like, I had my purity ring, like I was definitely like in it, as much as I possibly could be. And then after that, I went to Bible college, a little school called Davis College. And I got a 4-year degree in theology, and which is absolutely useless for women in a Baptist setting. You make highly qualified, overly qualified, unpaid volunteer.
Right.
But I met my husband there. So he and I have been married for 20 years almost. And we have 4 sons, 4 little boys.
Nice.
Not that little anymore, actually. My son is almost 15, my oldest. And we moved to Wilmington, Delaware. So I've been living there for 19 years. And I would say in college, I started to notice that my personality was not gelling with the way that they thought that women were supposed to be. Because heaven forbid you have an opinion, and be female. So I definitely found myself like going, well, how do I just felt like I was constantly failing at being a godly young woman. And that seemed to be sort of the theme of my faith, was failure, being broken and restored, broken and restored, broken and restored. I was always supposed to be spending like more time with God and more time memorizing verses and more time serving and more. It was never like enough. And yet there was supposed to be this factor of grace, like you're saved, you're God's child, and it's like, well, why do I feel like I'm always getting locked out of the house? Like, that's just kind of how it always felt. And
Damn.
It culminated into like a lot of moments of depression for me and sadness. And I couldn't relax. Like I just couldn't rest in the beauty of the moment, because I always felt like I wasn't doing enough to pursue God. And I knew that I wasn't doing enough if I suddenly felt comfortable. It was wrong to feel comfortable, because then you're apathetic. So I constantly wrestled with like, do I really have a good relationship with God, or am I just faking it? And my role in this body as a woman was the thing that really made me re-examine the Bible and say, you know what, this is being used to promote misogyny in my church and in my marriage and in the world that I live in. And that, to me, I just became very curious about that. And I decided I was going to research that. And as soon as I really started to relook at like language, sourcing, where did the Bible come from, who wrote it, why, culture, context, I just sort of went,
You can study your way out right out real quick.
Yeah. I was like, I have just been buying hook, line, and sinker everything that they taught me, imagining that they knew more than me.
Right.
And once I sort of allowed myself the freedom to say, maybe this isn't right, maybe this isn't the word of God, it was like the walls came crashing down. And for me, I was devastated. I mean, absolutely devastated, because I went from the like deconstructing to questioning my faith to complete and total deconversion, in that this faith doesn't even remotely make any kind of sense. It just doesn't. And I really tried. I did everything that I could to find God in this world, and God never really revealed himself to me. So, I mean, just that frustration alone, it's like, I just can't imagine that I could have done anything different. But, that's where my education is. That's where all my friends were. That's where, I thought my future was going to be and my career was going to be. And my whole sense of community, and it's just gone, and there's this question, like, what do I do with it now?
How long have you been deconverted for?
Not long.
Not
long. Like a year, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I've been deconstructing for probably 5 or 6 years.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that it starts way before you leave. You're not just gonna wake up one day and say I don't want to believe anymore. I'm not gonna go. It's a really, for me, I'm gonna speak for myself. It's a process. Like it starts with that first brick that falls. For me, it was the King James Bible. I was at a King James only church, and they swear up and down this King James Bible is perfect. And if you read an NIV, you're reading the wrong thing. You might get damned for that. That's what they say. And then finding out, then I started just doing some research about this king. What's so special about this King James Bible? Okay, and then I come to find out that this thing isn't perfect. Not only is it not perfect, it has added verses that come in the 14th century. So like what 1 John 5:7 has an added verse at the end that's not in any of the Greek manuscripts. It's only in one of the Latin manuscripts from the 4th century. So all of a sudden, when they're putting together what's called the Textus Receptus, it's a majority text in Greek in the 14th century, the person putting it together was like, I can't add this verse in here. It's not in any of the Greek manuscripts. And so a bishop produced a fake one on the spot. And this is like this is a reoccurring theme of the church. Eusebius, the church historian under Constantine, he was literally just left and right forging documents, making stuff up, adding stuff, deleting stuff, the forgery, interpolations all over the place. It makes you wonder if this is really God's church. Why do they have to do all this stuff?
That's the wild thing. They like to just kind of put out this blanketed statement of this is the most amazing document because it doesn't contradict itself, and it does. And I'm like, really?
But it does.
Really? I was at breakfast with somebody, and they said that's what they tried to say to me, and they just regurgitate this thing some old guy said to them once, and I'm like, all right, let's talk really quickly about that. Okay, let's talk about the character of God. So if you have the character of God that is in the Old Testament and the character of Jesus Christ that is supposed to be the same, we have to ask ourselves, would Jesus Christ go and kill all the firstborn Egyptian babies? after he himself
hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Yes.
Like, people don't understand that. Pharaoh's heart was hardened by God to make him that way. Like God made him decide all those crazy things because he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
And
so
then he punishes not Pharaoh, but the Egyptians. It's like one of those, and you mentioned misogyny, and I was just talking to another scholar about this earlier today, Jennifer Bird. We were recording an episode about the heroines of the Old Testament, Judith, Esther, and then Mary Magdalene. So that's coming on the way soon. But anyways, we were talking about how Miriam, who is the sister of Aaron, and it's her, Moses, and Aaron. They're the leaders of the Israelites coming out of Egypt. And Aaron and Miriam go to complain to God about something. And what do they get for complaining? He gives Miriam leprosy, but doesn't do anything to Aaron. He just says, "Oh, there's a woman here. Give her leprosy." Like it's one of those passages you read, and you're just going through the Bible like, what does this even mean? What's the message here? Or it's like they're all starving and thirsty in the desert. Like, God, please give us something. He's like, okay, I'll give you guys snakes to bite you. He sends them poisonous snakes because they're starving to death.
This is how I view it. Okay, if these people actually lived and existed, what happened was they happened to be starving and thirsty and came upon an infestation of snakes.
Right.
And then somebody wrote about it.
I have to explain that somehow, right?
Did that. Or maybe Miriam just happened to catch leprosy because it was common. Who knows? Or maybe all of these are just stories that people told about things that happened. Like, we just cannot source them. We cannot.
Absolutely.
And as often as I can, I'm looking at this going, people are asking the question, why God? Why this? Why that? Why that? And it's like, stop asking yourself that question and just say, what do I do with what is right in front of me right now? What can I do? What is within the character of goodness and love, so I can try to help somebody out? Because you and I had talked a little bit before we went live, but the character of the evangelical church and their treatment of racism and immigration and COVID responses was the exact opposite of being loving and kind and doing to somebody else what you'd want them to do for you. It was sort of like grab everything you can and then stand on top of a stack of Bibles and say, well, I have all the answers and I'm right and I'm going to heaven. Sorry, y'all. It's so completely arrogant. And that was really the nail in the coffin for me. I said, the Spirit of God is not with you.
The modern American church today, whether it's Baptist, evangelical, and just a normal born again church, if it's a Republican leading church, they don't even realize it, but they're doing the opposite of the teachings of the New Testament. Because the teachings of the New Testament, whether it's from Jesus or Paul, they line up to the sense where if we live under a government, right? The Romans, the Caesars, whoever it is, like let them rule, even if they're oppressive.
Mhm.
Just take it, turn the other cheek, let the government be the government. You're going to heaven. Just remember, you have the prize at the end. They don't do that. They want to fight against the grain. They want to make, oh no, we can't be communists, we can't be socialists, we have to be capitalists. Even though in Acts chapter 2, the newly converted people would throw their riches down at the feet of the apostles, and what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. Literally the definition of a communistic lifestyle.
Mhm.
They ignore that part though. Don't worry about that, because this
Right.
is America. It's America first, and then biblical principles second.
Mhm.
And I realized that after a couple of years being in the church, I realized that we're interpreting this book through the lens of a modern Republican ideology. It's not. They're not becoming Republican ideology because of the Bible. It's the other way around. And whether they
Mhm.
realize that or not, that's just a fact.
Mhm.
Because I mean, look at the earliest Christian cults, and they were not like this at all. They didn't care about capitalism or getting wealthy or getting their favorite politician to be the next consul in Rome. They didn't care about that.
Mhm.
They were worried about their communities. They're worried about getting people saved. They're worried about feeding the poor and clothing people and helping the sick. They were doing all that stuff. But
Well, and I think
praying for Antifa to get killed
Mhm.
and praying for Obama to die. That's not
Mhm.
Christianity. I don't know
Yeah.
what that is.
There's this mindset, I think, that if the early church really existed in that way, where they really thought that Jesus was coming back within their lifetime. So of course they would say things like, if you don't want to get married and be distracted by marriage and children, don't do that. Give everything that you have to each other, share it among, each other. Like, that makes sense if you really think you're in the end times. And so it's interesting to me though, because like you said, it's so different than it used to be, because now it's like the churches they're really feeling like, I'm just going to say this, I think they feel like, because they're losing a sense of control of the morality of our country, that they think that must be a sign of the end times. This is the great falling away.
Yeah.
We have the answers. So they're grabbing what they can and holding on to it. Like, this is mine. The wealth is mine. Everything is mine. I want it all to be mine.
Yeah.
And it's maddening to me, because there's no wisdom behind it. There's no care for people behind it.
Yeah, this one right here says, some of you will not taste death that are standing here, will not taste death till they have seen the kingdom of God come with power. That was 2,000 years ago. And did some of them not taste? No. If you actually understood the church history, though, this was actually a problem that they had to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
This is before Revelation gets written. If I'm guessing, speculating here, Revelation gets written, sort of fix that problem. Oh, it's 1,000-year reign. Don't worry. Satan's chained up for 1,000 years. Give it 1,000 years. So now they have a nice little window to play in. But 1,000 years ended up going past. And what happened? The Pope, Sylvester II, came out on St. Peter's Square and made an announcement. These are the end days, everyone. You have 30 years left. So, of course, that doesn't happen. So since that time till now, people have been predicting the end days, and it's just been failed date after failed date after failed date after failed date. If you knew the history, it'd make you sick how many failed dates have come and passed since that time period. And there's still today. People, you go to any church you go to, they got Daniel. They're reading, they're doing all this math, and it's going to happen in 2024. Watch, and 2024 is going to roll by, and nothing's going to happen. The world's not going to end. And then some other pastor will come up with a new date, 2027. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, everybody, come on, it's the end times. Get saved. And 2027 is going to roll around. Not going to happen again, and it's going to keep going until the sun gets so big that the climate change is so bad, and that's going to end the world. And then there'll probably be Christians then saying, "See, we told you." That's what's going to happen.
I think that there's something about them feeling as though they have some sort of control or power over this, that they can go ahead and make those baseless predictions And I think it's all about, I think what happens is well-meaning people can find themselves in pastoral positions thinking, I've been called to this is a good thing. And then they start to gain spiritual sense of influence over other people. And it's like addicting.
Right.
I think it's like straight dopamine, makes you feel great about yourself. And then you feel like, oh, this person, this pastor really spoke to my life. They were sort of the voice of God for me. They taught me that. And then before you know it, you've got this absolute power corrupts absolutely situation. Yep. And I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. I watched it destroy my own family and my own father. So it's one of those things where I told you I was willing to talk about this. I haven't ever before, but I've been disowned enough times by them where it's sort of like I've become comfortable to talk about the trauma of my own upbringing within a pastor's home, and to be able to talk about why this is happening far too often to people and how devastating it is to the souls of what could have been a previously really good person. That this faith gets in there and it's actually poisonous, right? Especially with Calvinism. Calvinism is especially poisonous, and I watched it happen to my own father. And that once he started to realize and think to himself, God really made vessels for destruction, human beings with souls for the purpose of hell. Yeah. That
Calvin was all predeterminism. So for under Calvinism, everything that's happening is just a play tape. Just press play button.
Right.
We're just playing God's little play sand.
So
we're his toys. So everything, all the evil is his own fault. So who are we to even care? It's like why?
That's it.
Calvinism makes no sense to me.
It doesn't. When you realize that when you think God doesn't care about these people, then you definitely don't care about these people.
Right.
And it's like there's nothing good in that. You can't say God is love. You can't say that God is, this loving parent that would ever do that. I'm a parent. There's nothing I would not do, to ensure the safety of my children. There's no lengths I wouldn't go to. And it doesn't make any sense to say when people say, well, he killed his own son. No. If God is sovereign, that blood atonement is absolutely unnecessary.
Doesn't matter. You can flick it. He can snap his fingers and everybody's saved.
Just forgive.
If your intention was to forgive people to begin with, then why aren't you doing that?
Right.
Like, think about how wild this is. The claim for Christianity is that, okay, we couldn't live under the laws of Moses. So God, because he's so loving, decided that he wanted to give us a way out by giving us a son who somehow is the Passover lamb, which isn't even an atonement for sins. If you look at the Passover lamb, it's not atonement for sins. The Yom Kippur goat is the atonement for sins, but he becomes both of those. So somehow he gives us a human as a human sacrifice, which is not even kosher either. But anyways, he just decides that he's going to give us a son, and his son's going to come on earth. And by the way, when he's on earth, he completely diametrically opposes the laws of Moses while he's here. Everything he says is a complete opposite of what of Moses and what the Torah wants, which makes no sense. Did God change his mind all of a sudden? If that's the case, then why are we guilty then? He changed his mind by sending his son, but we're still guilty. And then, okay, he gave his son on the cross. Okay, the sacrifice is up, but we're not there yet because we have to accept that it happened. We have to pretend in our minds. We have to align ourselves mentally, even though we can't see it. We have to agree on something that goes against all science, goes against all logic, goes against all history. There's no physical evidence of it. Jesus' name doesn't even get mentioned for like 40 years until after he's gone. But you have to accept it because it's your only way to heaven. But it's like, how can you force yourself to accept something that you can't even see? It's so mind-blowing once you actually take a step back and think about how illogical it is. It's very illogical.
Well, there's two things that I've heard people say, Christians say, that are hanging on. They're hanging on. One thing is, so many people wouldn't believe in it if it wasn't real. And I'm like, that's the dumbest reasoning I've ever heard.
And ask them, why is Islam growing so fast throughout the Philippines, Africa, all the Middle East, Persia, all the way to Afghanistan and Pakistan or India?
But that's not in front of their face.
Right. They don't see that. They don't see it growing faster than Christianity. Does that make it true? Oh, and by the way, who won all 4 crusades? The Muslims won all 4 crusades. So does that mean that God wasn't behind the Christians in those wars, but he was behind the Muslims? They wouldn't say that. No way. That's not true. All the churches that are in the Bible, all the churches, the 7 churches of Asia that are in Revelation, the main church of Antioch, Syria, the church that was in Alexandria, all of those became mosques. And now most of them still are mosques. The 7 churches of Asia are still mosques. Antioch, Syria, still a Muslim city. But, and like, do you think that's, like, if you look at history, it does not appear that there's a God behind Christianity. It doesn't. Like, it looks real bad for the church. It looks, and then like, okay, well, the Crusades was a Catholic thing. No, it really wasn't. The Byzantine Church was part of the Crusades. Even the Crusaders that were in England and France that hated the Pope, they were part of the Crusades. They got whooped. They got wiped off too. They didn't even make it to Jerusalem. They couldn't even get past Turkey. So it's like, if you had, and the reason why I bring that up is I know this is history, it has nothing to do with today, but I'm like, if you're really looking to look at the history of Christianity and say, is there really a God behind this thing? You would think that he would be there for those moments to get the Holy Land back, to get this, but there's none of that. It just all looks like natural evolution. That's what it looks like.
Well, it keeps changing. So that whole, it stays the same. The Bible is consistent through and through. It's bullshit, because basically, like, the way that Christianity has evolved, and now, we've got this sort of different facets between different denominations in our own country that all can't agree, and they're vastly different, and they focus on different things. But then you have this new, like, form of progressive Christianity, which is like, man, I tried so hard to be in there with them. I mean, I really, really did. And I just realized, you know what? This is just a repackaged version of the old thing that's nicer.
Yeah, it's evolution. It's an evolution version of a religion that was a lot older, that needed reformation.
Yeah.
Another thing I hear a lot about, this is the big one, especially Gary Habermas will say, if Christianity was false, the martyrs wouldn't have died. They wouldn't have died because they knew that was false. But we have no idea what happened to these martyrs until Eusebius, the church writer. All the accounts before that are conflicting with each other. So James has 2 different death accounts. Peter, no one even knows if Peter is even in Rome. There's no evidence that he was even in Rome. They don't even know what happened to Paul. He just disappeared out of history. All these martyrs, they really come from the 4th century, from Eusebius, the church writer, the same guy who was caught forging documents and making stuff up. He's the guy that we have to rely on for these martyrdoms. In fact, the reason why I know this isn't true, that these martyrs probably weren't really martyrs the way we think they are, or they didn't have a choice. There's always the option they had no choice to repent. They were just killed anyway. Because then it's like, why would they die for something they didn't believe in? Even if they didn't believe, what if they had no choice? But the final thing, on the nail in the coffin for this argument, is the oldest document we have even addressing this issue is from Pliny the Younger to Trajan the Emperor. And Pliny the Younger says to Trajan the Emperor, there's these Christians. This is in 110 AD. So this is early. He said, there's these Christians in Bithynia. They're kind of weird. They act like Jews, but they're not. We don't know what they're doing. They're a little strange. They're like superstitious. What should we do? Should we kill them? Should we let them go? He tells them to let them go. He said, let them be. He doesn't say slaughter them, martyr. There's no martyrdoms. They don't even care. It's like the earliest accounts we have of Christians. They don't even care about them. They're like, big deal. So it's like the whole martyrdom thing. It's like, you can see it's overplayed, definitely overplayed. And it's later history too.
Well, and going along with that is the sort of the second thing I keep hearing. And this is from people that I actually love in my life. When I try to have conversations with them about this, they say, we're like children, and God is like a parent, an adult. And we sometimes we have to, like, recognize that the stove is hot and you shouldn't touch it, but we don't want to, like, hurt them. We want them to know that it's hot. So we tell them, don't touch it, or I'm, like, going to spank you or whatever. And it's like, to me, I look at that and I go, no, we're not children. You're willfully putting blinders up and saying, right, God knows way more than I do. But then when presented with an argument that looks at this and allows for an opportunity to critically think through it, you're turning your back on that opportunity in favor of saying, I guess I just am not supposed to really understand.
Right. That's what it always comes down to. It always comes down to, we're just small little humans. We're like ants in a molehill. We don't know what's going on. And so it's like they always fall back to that. But, like, the other thing is, you mentioned how they get people when they get people young. That's when it's the worst. Because
Yes.
when you're afraid of hell at such a young age, even when you start to get confronted with facts and evidence and how evolution really is a fact and how the Earth's not 6,000 years old, and you get presented with these things in school. Even beyond that, even when you know that some of this stuff's not true, some of it's mythology, even at that point, you're still afraid of hell.
Right.
And for some reason, the mind of somebody who grows up getting told that there's a hell and a heaven, those people will always be afraid to question the very thing that they know it might not be true because of the thought that the hell could be possible.
Right.
So it's like that doesn't go away. Even when you're deconverted, that doesn't go away.
Well, and you're told that to doubt is like sin.
Yeah.
You need to be like they criticize doubting Thomas. They criticize the person who wanted to be healed and said, "Oh, give more faith." It's like you're touted as like being more honorable and holy if you walk forward in blind faith.
Right.
When everything else is telling you this isn't right.
I've heard pastors say, if I found in the Bible that it says 3 + 3 is 19, then I'm gonna have to figure out a way to make sure that I can understand this. I'll have to go to other sources and I'll have to find out why it's 19 because it said so.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard him say that.
That's
this is so insane. It's so insane.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. Since deconverting, I feel so much better. Like I just feel freer. Like I'm like, so I die.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen, and I'm not even ruling out that there might be something afterwards.
You know what? It would be so.
Don't know.
It'd be so nice if there is, but
it'd be nice if there was, but we just don't know.
But here's the thing,
and like to tell someone that you better believe what I believe, or else. Like even if you were right, like the fact that let's bring it to like some Aborigines living in Australia who have no idea what Islam is, what Christianity is, or it's like, are you saying that because they never heard the gospel, they were created just for the reason of being an NPC character in your world that you're the main character of? It sounds it's such a self-centered worldview if you think about it. Because I grew up in the right faith, I was in the right time, I had the right parents, I had the right church. I'm fine. Everything's good for me. But everyone else, they're screwed. Like, and it's like, what kind of world is this? You know?
Yeah, it's fostering lovelessness. It really is. It's telling. I think what the impact that I've seen on a lot of the Christians in my life, and I was this way myself. I was like, I have the answers. I'm somehow chosen. I'm super special. I'm really important. The world needs me. Listen to me. And like, it's just such a shitty way of like looking at the world, because we really need to be listening. And I think that was a huge piece of me being able to really deconstruct and eventually deconvert, was to really look at other people and go, their life experiences are just as valid as mine. Their viewpoints just as valid as mine. Their, the things that convict them, that's a form of deity within them. Why am I going to disregard it? Because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. Like, it just, to me, it felt so narcissistic.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah. And for me, I think one of the big things that got me really to be okay with like jumping away from that is when I looked at Christianity in the context of first century mystery religions, of what it's part of a genre of the time period, first century, second century. You have the Kybele and Attis religion in Phrygia. You have the Eleusinian mysteries over in Greece. In Egypt, they have the mysteries of Serapis, Isis, and Harpocrates, the Holy Child. And here you have Christianity, which is like a Jewish version of these very things. It's like today you have your rock music, you have your rap music, you have your hip hop, you have your dance, you have your, and like in these genres, there'll be the next big thing that'll come along and like really start a new like era in this sort. But if religions were like that back in the day, and like this is what Christianity fits perfectly when you look at the context of the last century to a century and a half before it.
Mhm.
Leading up to it, you'll see like everything that all the religious movements that are happening before Christianity fit perfectly into the context of where Christianity doesn't just come out of nowhere like some heaven sent thing. You can see the lead up to it. You can see the evolution of it. Like
there's always the blood sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a child that needs to die. There's always a half God, half man, you know, character that like is representative, and that person dies horribly and then is raised again. Like it's the same story.
Yeah, you got Eshmun, a Phoenician god healer. He wasn't a god at first. He was the son of someone, I forgot who it was, some queen or something. And he meets Aphrodite. There's another Phoenician name for her. Anyways, he ends up dying, and she raises him up, and he becomes a god after that. And this is a healer god who's like he's like a pretty much like very close to these other healer gods like Asclepius and Dionysus or whatever. But like the point I'm making is, I'm not saying Christianity copied them, but I'm saying Christianity looks like it looks like where it sits in the first century fits perfectly for an evolution of not bowing, but being inspired by other religions around it. Through Judaism, obviously, that's its main road of how it comes about. Like you could see that, especially when you read Third Enoch. Third Enoch's a book that is written in the first century, and there's a little Yahweh who's called Metatron, and he's a man who goes up to heaven, gets apotheosis, becomes little Yahweh, and comes back down. This is right before Christianity comes around. So you can see the people in Judea and Egypt, they were already playing around with this idea of there being a sort of a lesser god or a high archangel like Michael or something. So these ideas are already floating out there.
Well, I asked myself like the question, why? What is it about human nature that would cause humans to sort of come up with this version, of some events that seems to particularly save and rescue for the purpose of afterlife, because we're just afraid to die.
That you just answered the question. Think about it. Every human has a fear of death. That's just natural. The thought of not existing is it's terrifying to some people, not everybody. Some people are okay with it. Most people think about not existing, and that's pretty terrifying. So you have to imagine, like the ancient world, they have to think like it's only natural that they're going to come up with ways to make it easier, or make it feel like the Eleusinian mysteries, for example. I mentioned the Eleusinian mystery. If you got initiated into those rites, all the writers, all the historians that write about it say that people who got initiated into Eleusis were no longer afraid of death because they knew they had a spot in Eleusis, the fields of Eleusis, which is heaven. So this idea is universal. They might not think there's most of these religious movements didn't think about a actual physical resurrection like Christianity does, even though Egypt did. But they were like, okay, you'll go somewhere else, which probably actually makes more sense than a physical. Think about a physical resurrection. All the people who lived on this planet being physically resurrected at once. You know how crowded the earth would be? Like just like what? And what about people who are like cremated, and there's like molecules over here and molecules over there, just gonna send like a magnet together? Like how's that? I don't know. I have a lot of questions for that, but that's another. I guess that's another.
I know. Come on, Paul. You don't need to talk about women. Tell us how the pieces of a cremation are coming together.
Right. How does that work?
Help us with that one.
And and by the way, the text says it's all going to happen in Jerusalem. So they're all going to be little ass Jerusalem.
It's like in New Jersey, Israel.
1774. I lived in 1902. I lived in 507. It's like it's going to be madness.
We swallowed a whole lot of like just whatever they wanted to tell us, and they didn't even do the heavy lifting of like trying to see where it came from.
No.
And then when you would ask those harder questions, I know that you had said for you that was like, you're a naturally curious person, and so within that realm, of course you were going to be somebody that they found problematic because they didn't have the answers to your questions. So they have to demonize you and make you the enemy.
Right.
And that's so unfortunate that they won't engage.
Oh, and Justin Martyr in the fourth century, or what is it, second, third century, something like that. He addressed this exact problem that we're talking about now was going on back then.
Mm-hmm.
There was pagan writers who were like, "Come on, is Jesus is just like Dionysus? What do you guys? What are we doing here?"
Mm-hmm.
And Justin Martyr responded, was like, "All these other gods that look like Jesus, the demons made those up because they're trying to confuse you."
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
was their response to that. Was like, why does this Christianity look so similar to all these other religions? The demons did it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not kidding. It's what he wrote. And so it's funny how he says that. But like, I actually think when I look at Christianity for the real context of what it is, I appreciate it a lot more. I really do. I actually really like Christianity. Not to be a dogmatic religion to make people do your bidding and have a slave morality mindset. But when you actually study it for the early Christian groups like the Carpocratians, the Nacenes, the I don't know, the Ebionites, the the Valentinians, all these different groups that were around, they were really fascinating people, and they were just people who wanted to have communities and wanted to believe in something greater. And you could see you could see how it worked in that sense. Once it became this thing where it's like the theocratic rule of like the church, and even just like Protestant movements coming after that became like Puritan movements, and hanging witches at the stake, and that it gets you become what you thought was evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it now in our country. That original founders come in order to have religious freedom from Catholicism, and now they're controlling the government. And it's like, to me, it's mind blowing, and it's dangerous. I kept my mouth shut for a long time, and I'm pretty outspoken because I didn't want to hurt anybody who was still like a friend within Christian circles.
Sure.
But that is done now. Like I feel like I have no choice but to call out all of these, just the selfishness that comes with them trying to impose their own sense of morality onto an entire country of people who don't agree with them. And it's hurting so many people, and it's people that I love. It's people that I'm raising. Like, so it's just like you had said earlier, once they start to really kind of come in there and infiltrate the government and try to control all these things, you go, this isn't just about whether or not it's mythology or not. This isn't about whether or not this is like a cool book that you can sort of look at it and go, oh, this is very creative, or I could see why this had its place and its purpose here. No, you start to see how it's actually ruining people's lives when wielded by bad people in order to maintain a sense of power, influence, and control over them.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is I recently, especially ever since January 6th, I've been hearing a lot of Christians try to make the argument that the founding fathers intended this to be a Christian nation.
Oh.
And you have pastors teaching people this. Mm-hmm. It's such a falsehood. Like, for example, Thomas Jefferson, I've examined all the known superstitions of the world. I do not find in our particular superstition of Christianity one redeeming feature. One redeeming feature. They are all alike, founded on fables and mythology. And if you actually read the founding fathers, they were mostly deists, they were constitutionalists, they were democratic. Like, these are people who are these are principles that are found in Athenian government that predate Christianity, back when they were pagans, and they're classical liberal French ideals, basically, and they're actually opposing the church. They're anti-Christianity to the core. It's actually more neutral than that, though. It's not opposing Christianity, but it's saying Christianity, you're not anywhere better than Islam or Hinduism. You're just a way of life, and you're fine. You can have your church, but you do not have any control in government whatsoever. And it blows my mind that people think that this is what they intended, but it was the exact opposite. I got a Thomas Paine quote that'll just blow your mind. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. Yeah. Okay, so this is Thomas Paine. Let me just pull this up real quick. Thomas Paine thought that Christianity was mythology. He called it a fable. And but the Christian story of God the Father putting His Son to death or imploring people to do it, for that is the plain language of the story, cannot be told by a parent to a child, and to tell him that it was done to make mankind happier and better is making the story still worse, as if mankind could be improved by the example of murder. And to tell him that all this is a mystery is only making an excuse for the incredibility of it. And there's a lot of quotes like this from the founding fathers that are like, dude, they're not Christians. I'm sorry, they're not. This is not a Christian nation. This is one of the first nations, finally, after 1,000 years, to finally oppose the church, led by the U.S. and France, Napoleon and Washington. Like that's really what it comes down to. It's actually the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about like the whole Pledge of Allegiance, and it's saying one nation under God.
Right.
One nation under God, indivisible. Yeah. Like,
it doesn't say under Jesus, or it doesn't say under Allah. It doesn't say. It's literally it's meant to be inclusive. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be like under God, like your own God, pick your own religion. Like that's what that means. It's kind of clear because there's not a single quote from Deuteronomy in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. There is no Paul's letters in the Constitution. Nothing. Mm-hmm. It's all classic liberalism, mm-hmm. of like giving people their rights. Mm-hmm. You know,
it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, right. And that's what I'm getting at, is like how they lost that insight, mm-hmm. how they think that, and there's people who really do think that they're doing the right thing by making Christianity Christian, or making the United States Christian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they're leaning more and more towards taking away people's rights than anything else, except the right to bear arms. Let's keep that one.
And I love that one.
This is all about control. It's about controlling women. That's, the pro-life versus pro-birth. It's that controls women right there. You control weapons, meaning if you have all the weapons that you want, then you get to control that. You get to control what people do in the bedroom and who they love. If you can try to ban gay marriage. I mean, what is going to happen to people who have been together and in love and have their insurance together and have their home together? Like leaning towards controlling what everybody else does except for them.
I just got one more that I got to show. This one's just priceless. So where the government preambles, it's really hard to read, but I'll just read it for you guys. So where the preamble declares that coercion is departure from the plane of the holy author of our religion, an amendment was proposed by inserting Jesus Christ, so that it would be a departure from the plan of Jesus Christ, the holy author of our religion. The insertion was rejected by the great majority, in proof that they meant to comprehend within the mantle of its protection the Jew, the Gentile, the Christian, the Mohammedan, the Hindu, and the infidel, and every denomination referring to Virginia act as this is after that, as he's talking about the act of religious freedom. He's saying this is not about Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's not about anything that Jesus said. This is about rights for everybody: Hindu, Mohammedan, Jewish, Gentile, anybody. Mm-hmm. He even throws he even said what do you say? He said the infidel. Mm-hmm. The word infidel. If you're an infidel, you're protected too. You can be an infidel if you want. Yeah. Then what does that tell you? That just what else needs to be said? Mm-hmm. How do you interpret that as this is a Christian nation?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like they stood up on their platform and said, well, we're the ones who have the truth, so we're going to go ahead and give it to the world. That's the best that we have to offer. And so in like the 80s, like in the whole Jerry Falwell realm where he's trying to get control over the Republican vote, like they've been weaseling their way in there in order to be able to accomplish the very thing that they're doing today. Yeah, that all started 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Before that. And so to be like, I was born in 1979, to go ahead and be like, this is coming to fruition.
Yeah. The big Christian movement is kind of relatively new, mm-hmm. especially with the Republican Party. And I got a clip that I got to play. I showed this to you before. We have a couple of clips we're going to play. Mm-hmm. And the church that I was involved in was very connected to like the Republican Party, the GOP. Like there was people who were like coming on podcasts with the pastor I was with, like Roger Stone, David DiPietro, like people in the Republicans that were like connected to this church that I was at. And it's just crazy how it's only a couple steps from pastor to president when it comes to Republican. It's kind of crazy. But I'm gonna just play this one clip. This is my pastor. When I was actually at this I'll just play it.
But if you gave me an AK-47 right now with enough ammo to take all of you out, and before I did it, I started blaspheming the Holy Ghost's name and then took you out and then put the gun in my mouth, I still end up in heaven.
And it's just something like that is like all you need to do for you to be like, okay, they don't care. They don't care about anything. They're chosen. You're not. It's their way or versus your way. Like it's clearly it's like the mindset of a fascist. Like I can do whatever I want and it doesn't matter. This is my world, not yours. Mm-hmm. We choose, you don't. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't matter what he does. I'm going to have it. I'm chosen. That's a scary mindset to have.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, what it does is it feeds that fuel of I've got power. I've got the truth and you don't. So there's this big, huge contrast there where it's almost like competitive. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to heaven, you're going to hell. I've got life ahead of me, you've got death ahead of you. And it's like, are we 8?
It is a very childish worldview. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely childish. It really is. And if someone like that, you throw a question at them, oh, when was Daniel written? Why does the scholar say it was written in 200, not 600 BC? They'll just ignore you. It's just they're not willing to discuss anything. This is true. This book is true, and whatever you say doesn't matter. It's a lie, Satan. Mm-hmm. Ignore it, even if you can demonstrate it right in front of them.
Oh, it's their interpretation of the book is true.
Right.
Like, like they somehow have the Spirit of God within them, giving them authority over you in order to be able to tell you what it actually means.
Right.
And somehow it always seems to coincide with what they would actually want anyways, which is to influence you, to take your money, to take your time, to take your love. It's
so crazy that you said that, because that same exact pastor who you just heard from, he used to constantly, whenever we got to the topic of love your neighbor, he would get so mad about this topic. It would like tweak him out, and he would say, it does not mean that your neighbor who's not a Christian that you love. It means you love your neighbor who's a Christian. That's what it means. And he would say that all the time, over and over and over again, day in, day out. Every time that topic came up, he would make sure you knew that.
It's not love.
No, it's not. And that's not what a neighbor is. A neighbor is someone that's out on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
For Christianity, the term is brother or sister. A neighbor is someone. He's actually teaching the wrong message, because your neighbor is supposed to be someone else that's not your brother or sister.
Well, that's the thing, that it was this. Okay, we're the fold. We live in the fishbowl, and we're going to go ahead and we got to bring other people into it. But the way that we do that is we don't go to them. We bring them into us, and then we conform their thinking. And before you know it, they're talking, walking just like us. They're in the club too. Right. And now we're all the same, and the system of hierarchy has supported that level of influence for so long. And ultimately, just being a woman, I was so disgusted by it, because I felt like all these male pastors wanted to use me. They wanted me to influence other people. They wanted me to bring other people in to sit underneath their authority, and I watched it happen in my own family. I watched my dad go from being like a really nice guy to being really, really nasty. Like, can hardly stand to be in the same room with him anymore, because he's just mean, And so for me, to watch him sort of evolve as a pastor, I felt like he devolved, as a pastor, because he just became so filled with anger at people. Like, there was no love. It was like this thing was tacked on at the end of it, where he would preach these sermons that were just railing against people and yelling. Like I told you,
did you want to show that, or do you want to not?
Well, I want to mention one. I need to preface it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
It's going to feel like I'm throwing my family under the bus, but you should.
No, but I understand where you're coming from.
So I'm coming from a place where I have been disowned by my family. And so I haven't spent time with them in years. And it has come to my attention that my own father has used his position of authority in order to groom and exploit women that he was counseling to try to have sexual relationships with them. And so, yeah, it's true. And I have victim impact statements, and it's the kind of thing that when they're ready to have those released, they wanted me to be the vehicle to release them. And they reached out to me because they knew that I would believe them. And for a long time, they didn't think that I would believe them. And so I confronted my mother about this, and she victim blamed and said, oh, he's different than he used to be, and he's a different person now. So I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with that.
Oh, wow.
I know. So there's this piece of me that's like, what do you do when it's your own father that's doing this to women that were my friends and women that were younger than me in a counseling setting? You know, these women were very, very like traumatized by these events, often suicidal, you know, and it's so painful to think, as a woman growing up in that family, of course I believed them because I saw his behavior towards women every single day. I always wondered what it would be like to like see my mom be respected, see her actually be treated with honor, but he treated her terribly because she was a woman. He thought she was kind of like ridiculous and silly, and he would make fun of her. She was the butt of every joke. And it was just, that's how my life was too, as his daughter. You know, he was like, you need a male head. Like women are too emotional to be able to make decisions on their own. They need a man in their life. He's actually told my husband that he needs to grow a pair and do something, like do what you need to do to get control of your wife. And so it's like, when this toxicity is so pervasive within somebody's family and it's still being preached from a pulpit, there comes a moment where you say, I have been silent long enough. I'm calling this out now. And if anybody out there sees this and they're also a victim, you know where to find me. Because I think that exploitation that male pastors had over really vulnerable women within their congregations, I mean, it's off the charts within the SBC, the way that women were groomed and the way that women were treated and exploited and controlled, and all within the name of, this is his responsibility. You can trust him. And it's like, I grew up and became an adult and said, I can't trust anybody now, least of all the person who raised me. You better believe I'm going to start talking about it.
Wow, that was powerful. That really was.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me. I was like, I'll get through it without crying, because
you can just tell that came right from the heart. Like, there was no BS in what you just said for the last 5 minutes.
Well, it's extremely devastating to me that this was my family, my own family, because I speak out. I am the director of a nonprofit that focuses on women's empowerment. And, you know, it's like, we run media content, and that a lot of what we do is this sort of, you know, calling out abusive leadership, especially abusive leadership when it comes to women. And so to find out that women started coming to me 20 years after the fact and saying, your father did this to me, it was devastating to me. But at the same time, I felt like, okay, I finally became a safe person that they could talk to. And so it cost me my relationship with both of my parents because, you know, they're unapproachable about it. But I do tune into my dad's sermons from time to time. And he's still preaching a lot of sermons that I think are really, really problematic, like very homophobic. For example, the day after actually, it was a Saturday, they had the Pride Parade in Buffalo. And so there was all the decorations everywhere. And my dad ended up driving down Elmwood Avenue where everything was colorful. and decided in that moment to change his sermon. And the next day decided to preach on Sodom and Gomorrah. From his pulpit, he decided that...
By the way, there's no archaeology for Sodom and Gomorrah that there's ever were cities there. They just found a crater in the ground and said, "Hey, that looks like a place where God got mad and killed everybody."
Mm-hmm.
And that's, people just believe this story till today. This never happened.
First of all, they're teaching the story to children.
It's crazy. It really is.
For a million reasons, you should not do that. But to look at it and go, there's just not even a good person in the city. Not even one. Not even the 2-year-old toddling around.
Right, like what? Not human? Like what? That story is so whatever. I don't know. I mean,
it's messed up. But he decided he's going to focus on how the LGBTQ agenda is taking over our country, and we're going to lose our entire sense of morality. And like, it was just really, really over the top. He actually said, "It made my blood boil to see that they've taken away the rainbow promise of God, and like, we need to take the rainbow back." And I just thought, he's using his pulpit for so much toxicity. It's so...
I've had a pastor. I had a pastor. I think it might arguably be worse. But yeah, we can deal that out later.
So, all right. So what I do for some of what I do for media content, I post through organization called A's Rising, and it's a group of writers, and we just sort of write whatever kind of justice issues we're thinking about, whatever's on our mind. Yeah. It's kind of a collaboration. But this one particular time, so as you well know, there was a shooting in Buffalo.
Right.
That was specifically targeting the predominantly Black community supermarket. This white supremacist motivated teenage young man monster decided that he was going to go ahead and stalk this particular store for the purpose of shooting Black people inside and leaving the white people behind. Now, this is my city. Right. I know that tops.
Me too. It's still closed down right now.
Yeah.
If you drive past it right now, you'll see a bunch of flowers on front of it. People dropping their flowers up. It's shut down. It's not opening anytime soon. I think
it would be really traumatizing to walk through those.
Yeah, that's never going to open up ever. It's gone. That tops is gone.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So I mean, we've walked those aisles, and to go, I would not have been shot if I were there that day, but a friend of mine would have been. Why? Like, what is this? So it was extremely upsetting to me. I was mourning for my city. This is my home. And it happened on a Saturday. And then on a Sunday, I decided to tune into my dad's sermon in hopes that he would be preaching something about mourning, and grieving and recognizing how white supremacy and violence towards Black people in our country has been absolutely devastating to our own very city. But he took a very different take on it. And so I clipped together some of the really problematic and strange things that he said, and just recognized the fact that this is an inner city church that he was preaching to, predominantly white. It looked like there was one Black man sitting in the pew, and I could see that my dad kept looking at him. And it was, and so that's really the preface, this like sort of condensed sermon, and then a very, very weird prayer at the end. So you kind of see what I've been living with, dealing with.
Yeah, so about 5 minutes long. So, but it gets to the point. You'll see. Should I play right now?
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any machete murders in the Congo. There wouldn't be any persecutions to the point of death in China. And there wouldn't be any mass murders at a Tops on Genesee Street. Now, the Christian church needs to pray. We need to be steadfast when it comes to praying for this community. Because it's a powder keg. Something like this can explode, especially in the summer. The weather's right. Okay? The weather is right for people to come out into the streets and want to exact revenge. It is hard not to have thoughts of hatred and revenge towards people. But Jesus calls us to be different. That's why when he hung on the cross, after all he went through, he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. To keep this ministry going, because it is a ministry of reconciliation. It is a ministry that teaches forgiveness and love and grace and mercy and salvation through the Lord Jesus Christ and what he did on the cross at Calvary. With all men, not just white people, not just Asian people, not just Hispanic people, not just black people, all people. Christianity knows no color. In Jesus Christ, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female. In Christ, live peaceably with all men. Verse 9. And then he follows up with this. Therefore, verse 20, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. That means shame. Shame. And then, but how about government? Where did government come from? Who established government? God did. God established government. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. 10 of our neighbors are dead. We're not used to this kind of thing in Buffalo, New York. This has never happened before in this city, ever. A mass shooting like this, mass murder. Never. We're the city of good neighbors, right? Well, now we're going to see. And I pray that people will love one another and people will understand that there will be justice. There will be justice. And God is the one who will wreak vengeance and wrath upon those who do evil. And the government has been put here by Almighty God to protect people from evildoers. Good. Don't try to overcome evil with evil, or else you will set off a powder keg that will destroy a lot more lives than those 10 precious lives that were extinguished yesterday. Side of our community. Some white people hate black people because of the skin color. Some black people hate white people because of the skin color. Some people beat up Asian people because of their skin color. Latinos are beat up and persecuted because, why? Why, Lord? This has to stop. The church needs to be salt and light. We should not be preaching a social gospel, but the true biblical gospel that saves people from hell. So, Lord, I pray for churches everywhere in the city that they would be preachers of the biblical gospel, not activists, not social gospel preachers, which don't help anybody's. Lord, I pray that you would protect everybody here. Lord, for those who might not have come to church today because they might have been afraid that there'd be some type of retaliation, we pray that you would give them courage and we would see everybody back again next week.
Wow. I can see what you're saying about that.
That's our city. That's our pastors.
Yeah. Oh, and just to add to this, when it comes to political, we're talking about the political side of all this. How it's really what it comes down to is like I noticed at the end he had to throw in not the social movements. Don't be a protester. Don't be in the social gossip stuff. Be a defender of the faith. That's gonna work. That's always worked. That's why the world's so great. Christianity's been here for so long, right? Anyways, you got the one I used to go to didn't even hide. He didn't even esoterically insert messages. He just flat out told you, if you don't vote for Trump, you're going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll show you that real quick.
Trump. For he that biddeth him Godspeed by his vote is a partaker of his evil deeds. I get inside that booth and I draw that curtain, and this is not the Wizard of Oz. My father sees right through the curtain. And when I pull that lever, if I pull that lever for one of those D's that hates my father and hates Israel and is for communism and kills little babies, my father is recording, watching, and will hold me accountable for that one day. You can't vote for a Democrat and be a Christian, according to the Bible. So what would happen? You know what he would do? He'd vote for Donald Trump. And you know what his lesson to you is? One of the last things he said when he rose from the dead. Go to John chapter 21. Donald's middle name is John. Gospel of John, great gospel. John chapter 21, verse 22. Here's the last words are read. He would say, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that doubt to thee? Follow thou me. Why don't you go in the voting booth and do what I would do? Follow me.
Somehow interpreted "follow thou me" into that has to mean vote for Trump. Boom! Like mind blown. Where did you pull that from? I don't know.
Yeah.
He literally goes, "Well, I don't know how." He literally says, "Well, I don't know how I know you should vote for Trump." Pull up the book of John, which is his middle name. Oh, look, it says "follow thou me." Follow thou me must mean vote for Trump. Like, do you understand? It's so insane. How do you go from point A to point B? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. So I think, you've got your old pastor who's this person who's just
Doesn't give a shit what he says.
he's just crazy. Like he just, and you can go ahead and just follow him or you can disregard him. And then you've got pastors that are like my dad who are just a little bit more covert in their, and they're like, it's going to be nuanced, but this is what I actually mean, and it's so manipulative.
They're getting at the same thing.
Yeah. It just manipulates the congregants, and I hate it. Like, I hate it. I hate that I sat under it for so long. I hate that I let it make me feel bad about myself. Like, the Christianity that I was raised with is basically, essentially, you're born in your sin. You're really awful. And every part of you is awful. And you need this savior. And as this little girl, they put a little, I'd be sitting crisscross applesauce, and my teacher would put a flannel graph of bloody Jesus on the wall, and she'd say, you deserve that. That's what you deserve. And I just like, I'm 5, like I'm 5. I deserve that. And, graphic depictions of the crucifixion. So the entirety of Christianity is founded in this self-hatred. And I'll be really, really honest. Okay. So should we tell them who my brother is?
We could. Let's not talk about him, but we can say
no. I want to point out something he said in his talk with you.
Okay,
I thought was.
If you guys know, remember Richie, my friend who I had on here twice. If you've been following my channel for more than a few months now, you know Richie. He's been on my channel twice. He was the musician. He's the Christian. He's very, very, very holds no punches. Gets to the point. Tells you what he thinks. Well, he got some mixed reviews when he was on here. Let's just say that. But yeah, that's your brother, and we didn't even know this until a little bit after we met. It's interesting, very interesting.
We did not. That's how we sort of. I saw you on my friend Tim's show, and then that was a mutual friend that we had. I was so impressed with that interview. I totally was like, oh, this guy could totally be my friend. And then I was like, oh, he actually is friends with my brother. I haven't lived in Buffalo in 20 years.
Wow.
So it's a small world after all.
It is.
But when I saw your interview with him, there's just some things that he said that I thought were, it made me so sad, because I could see how within his own realm of how he views himself in Christianity, it was very common, because, I felt the same way, but there's this foundational self-hatred of, you're not moral. You're never going to make good decisions without God. You can't do anything without the Spirit. And trust me, I know it's true. And I just thought to myself, no, it's not true that we can develop a sense of morality that cares and loves other people outside of this whole, your heart is deceitfully wicked and black, and you'd become a serial killer, unless you go ahead and accept Jesus Christ as your personal savior, but you're still in your sin. You're still, because you're a human being, you're still going to fail every single time you try.
Yeah.
And just that spot of perpetual discouragement, that's what I saw in him during his interview with you. And I just wanted to shake him and be like, no, like, you're so obviously self-deprecating unnecessarily. Like, you're a good person, you're a smart person. There's nothing evil about you, and you don't hurt people. Like, why are you being belligerent right now? So I didn't understand it. And I was just speaking to it in case anybody saw, both of those.
And that's what a lot of Christians end up in, that mindset where you have to tell yourself that you're a sinner, you're bad, you're worthless, you're not worthy of heaven unless I'm believing X. Like, unless I just pretend, even if it's like, how do you even know you believe in something? Like, the belief thing is such a weird concept. Do you believe it? Do you not? If you've seen it, you can't prove it, but you weren't there. But you have to align yourself with an idea. That's really what it comes down to. What it comes down to is Christianity is about aligning yourself with a set of ideas. And they just say, they call it faith. That's how they define faith.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you can say that you believe something, but you don't know. You can't know about something unless you saw it. So it turns into this weird thing where it sort of alters your mindset, because you're forcing yourself to believe something, even though you can't prove it or not.
Well,
especially when the evidence is against it. That's when it's even worse, because then you're like, you have to start playing mental gymnastics and how they're all lying. Scientists are lying. NASA's lying. Everyone's lying except for my pastor.
So here's exactly what happens. The cycle for me, it was that I trusted my dad. He brought me up. Turns out he didn't want a daughter. He wanted a disciple. And when I wasn't the disciple that he wanted, he disowned me. That sticks with a girl, that sticks with a girl who I would have been a really good daughter, if I had a loving father. And like, it's just heartbreaking to me that I'm raising kids now, and I could never imagine a scenario in which I would say to them the things that he said to me. But I trusted him, so I bought his faith, hook, line, and sinker. And then I went ahead and went to college, Bible college, and I had all these professors, and they were just so smart, and they would sit there and tell me all the things, and I just, okay, you know more than me. And then I trusted my pastors and was underneath their influence, and just really appreciated them, just like speaking into my life, this faith. And I thought, they know, more than I do. And then something happened, and I started teaching. And I was teaching sometimes 3 or 4 women's Bible studies a week. I was writing curriculum. I was studying all the time. I was in seminary. And then I realized, as I was learning, that I didn't have any kind of personal connection with this God, that it was all me. And it was me looking to them, trusting them blindly, that they knew more than me. And then now I was going ahead and teaching it to other people as though it was real for me and true for me. And I realized that I was not being true to myself at all in that. And that was incredibly convicting for me. And then COVID hit, and I had the excuse to bow out of church for a while. And once I was far removed from it for a time, I realized I was being brainwashed the entire time. Wow. And you get your skin.
We deconverted around the same time because when I watched how COVID was handled by these churches, and they're saying, don't wear your mask, God will save you. and this is my own experience. I watched an 82-year-old man die of COVID who was coming to my church without a mask because he was listening to my pastor, who my pastor was previously before he was a pastor, he was a medical doctor. So he has MD in his name on his YouTube channel, on his pulpit. He's a medical doctor, pastor, far right wing. The guy you just talked to, that guy was a medical doctor, believe it or not, anesthesiologist. Well, anyways, he's telling people don't wear your mask. It's a phony virus. It's fake. It's not even real. The Chinese created it. This guy comes to church. He dies of COVID. Guess what his will was written to? The church. He had no family. All he had was us. We were his family. So he dies of COVID from coming to the church, and he gives $100,000 in his will to our church. That pastor that you just saw, who said he could shoot at you, think 47, get away with it, he got $100,000 during COVID from someone who died at his church from COVID.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
that was a wake-up call for me.
Yeah, I mean, seeing that and just going, these leaders have they put themselves in a position to be godlike over people, and you're supposed to trust them. And I think that for me, the biggest thing was recognizing that I couldn't trust one of them. You know, every single one of them let me down in some way, shape, or form because they're just human. And then you give them this power, you give them this like ability to, you know, to have this influence over you, to control how you spend your time and your money and your, you know, and who you give your love to. And that you end up being like, I'm in a cult. This place owns me now. And I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to have wasted my time.
Well, I was there 3 times a week, recording podcasts, producing, editing videos. That's where I learned all this stuff from the church. It's really kind of crazy.
It's so hard because they go ahead and say, oh, these are your spiritual gifts from God and you need to use them and you feel compelled to be productive. But all the while, you're really lining their pockets.
Yeah.
On a volunteer basis, you're really putting them in a position where they get to be God to people.
Yeah. And I remember when the church finally had enough watch time hours and views and subscribers to be monetized. We had the conversation beforehand. Should we get monetized? Because then we'll have to run ads and people might not. We're not here for that. They're like, yeah, we probably won't even do it. We'll probably just stay unmonetized. As soon as the green light went on from YouTube said you can be monetized, they were like, okay, just take it. Let's take it.
So no question. No, maybe we should pray about this and see.
Yeah. They went from when we weren't monetized, they went from we don't want to be monetized. And then when they could be monetized, okay, yeah, let's do it. But it's funny because it's the same mindset with these televangelists. They'll talk crap about the televangelists. Oh, these televangelists, we're not like them. But you know damn well if they were in their shoes, they'd be doing the same thing. Racking that money in.
They can't resist.
Right.
They cannot resist. So when I was, I had a job. I was helping an old United Methodist church develop a contemporary service. So that was the first job that I had after, you know, all my kids had started going to school. And I found myself in these business meetings. Well, there are church staff meetings where they'd start out by opening up with prayer. We'd talk about requests and we'd run through every single person in the church's name, even though I didn't know them all. And it was sort of cloaked. It was a spiritual thing cloaked in a business meeting where they just really wanted to talk about how can we bring in tithing members? Right. How can we get them in the pew, in the door, how can we find out what their spiritual gifts are and then make them feel great about themselves so that we can utilize them, so that we can get more people. Yeah. And like they wanted high quality people.
We would always have those talks once a month. If you're not tithing, if you're just coming in here and you're not tithing, you really better rethink your faith. Like if you have it and you don't want to give it, you got to rethink that. Do you really have? Do you really have faith like you say you do? Like they would have those talks, like they pressure people into tithing. That was a thing. That was definitely.
Yeah, that's straight out of the cult workbook.
Speaking of tithing, now watch me be a complete hypocrite here. Because speaking of tithing, we do have some super chats. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, people did have some super chats. So yeah. Robert Herring, thank you for the super chat. It says, dude, my oldest is dating a Mormon. She just started playing the Stop Drinking and joined my church. I'm like, yeah, but oh no, my wife is tripping. Yeah, man. It's like that's what happens. You meet people, and it's a lot of times it's through relationships. We know someone. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of times people meet people, and they completely gets them. That's what gets them into that world, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough one because it's like you start to see somebody, you feel like they're slipping away.
Or
you know?
or it looks like their life's getting better because of it. They met somebody, they got pep in their step. How do you stop? How do you tell them? Oh, that's like you almost in some cases it's like you just let it be, let it play out. And you hope that they don't become fundamentalists. You hope that their life becomes better and they can be a good Christian, because there are good Christians. Let's be honest, there are some good Christians out there, but like it's a weird gray area for people because getting in a relationship is a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Finding someone that you are into, that you love, or whatever, that's a positive thing. You can't say it isn't. So that's like I agree with you. That's a tough situation.
I would just ask questions and try to keep her staying in touch with reality and in tune with her truth and the truth that you raised her with. Because I think I think a lot of times it's like I found my way out. Other people will too. I wasn't ready until I was ready. And I think each of us has, our own little journey that we got to go on. And sometimes we're going to trip up. And, I think that it's hard when you see your own child maybe going down a path that could be very painful for them. But maybe they just need to go down it. And just stay open to like communicating with them, because the minute you start to show any sense of judgment or like tripping, they'll stop talking to you because they don't want to upset you.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Harmonic Atheist, our friend Tim, has jumped in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. How do you protect kids from the mythology of Christianity? That's the number one question.
It's a good question. I mean,
I think he answered it though. Mythology. If you keep it within the context of what it was meant to portray in the context of mythology of first century religions, if we keep it historical, keep it factual, it's a lot better to understand. It makes you like Christianity a lot more. At least for me. That's why I do this channel. So I like Christianity. I really do. I like it to study it historically, mythologically, all that stuff. Not fundamentally, not becoming a fundamentalist or take it seriously or take it literal. Like that's where I cross the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. I'm raising 4 kids, and I'm married to a very conservative, devout, evangelical Christian.
Oh,
and
wow.
I cannot blame him because I was right there with him. So it's
interesting.
It is interesting. It's very interesting. It's a good thing he's nice. But our kids, he's asked to bring them to church, until they reach a certain age, which is the Southern Baptist Church. And I have agreed to allow that for a while. But when I do talk to my kids about faith, I'm just really honest about where I landed. And I said, look, I was in this my whole life. And there's some really nice things that you can learn, through it. But ultimately, you've got to really critically think and ask yourself the hard questions, because your mind is your own. Your faith is your own. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have studied this and I have found it to not be true. And if you want to talk to your father about what he believes, that's fine too. Go do that.
Study it on your own.
Find a way to do the best you can with what you have.
Do unbiased research into the matter and come up with your own conclusion. And then come to me after that. Let's discuss it.
Right. And, I've committed to being really open to whatever they're into. It's one of those things where if they were, that's a disappointment to me would be if they felt like they needed to like witness to all their little friends so that their friends didn't go to hell, or put mom on the prayer list so she doesn't go to hell. I feel like that's anything else I can handle. Wow. But that would be the challenge for me. But I did all those things. I was all those things, so I can't fault them for it. But like I said before, I found my way out, and I would trust that they would too. Yeah,
that's interesting. That was good. Bill Castle says, God gets too much credit, but not enough blame. Love your channel. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
That's nice.
Yeah. I think that might have been the last one. I think so. I'm not sure. I'm checking right now. Yeah, that was the last one. So yeah, what else did you want? Anything else you want to say in closing, that for anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, I just really appreciate the opportunity to share my story. I haven't really yet. And I think, that it comes from a lot of trauma, and I'm comfortable telling it now because I've had a lot of therapy and some time. I will never put a toenail in a church again. I think they're wolves, and I think they're coming for people. And I think that I've seen it with my own eyes in the worst ways. And for myself, I'm free. I feel like leaving Christianity saved me. Like, I'm a totally different person now, but I'm a better person now. And so many people have told me that, and they've reached out to me and said, "What is going on with you? What are you doing? Like, you're so alive, and bright and better and positive." And, I have to tell myself that I am, because I left Christianity. I left that trap, that cycle of self-hatred and self-deprecation, and feeling the need to constantly please a God that was out of reach. And to recognize, what, we get this life. This is the one we get, and who knows what's happening after. You better live it up. You better surround yourself with good people who love you. You better love the shit out of them, and you better pass on the ones who are out there to hurt you, and hurt other people, which is why I've been so forthcoming about this. In the past, I would have been very cautious to bring my family into it. But the truth is they've not done anything to earn that level of respect from me, because they continue to do harm. And so, being somebody who's like trying to help people work their way out of this toxic thinking, I have to be really specific instead of like talking in generalities and hoping that people will actually believe me. So anyway, that's really kind of where I'm at. And it's exciting to me to be able to really, share that with you, like a fellow Buffalonian twin person who I have a ton in common with. And I really just enjoyed your interview too. So
I really appreciate having you on, and this was great. This hour and a half flew right by.
Mhm.
And we'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll, maybe do this again sometime.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And everyone, thank you for being here. And like I always say, you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over